Neil Lazarus here. That was quite a week that was in Israeli politics and the Middle East. Iran didn't challenge the status quo, it changed it. For the first time we saw, on April the 14th, an attack directly on Israel by Iran. Allegedly in response to Israel's targeting of a member of the International Revolutionary Guard in Damascus, in the consulate of Iran. But the reality is the war between Iran and Israel has gone on for many years. In fact, if we really need to understand it, we have to go back to the ideology of Shiaism and the Ayatollah and the extreme concept of the coming of a Messiah and the end of days. But the reality is, in the last decade at least, Iran has developed war with Israel by proxy. With every opportunity, Iran would use its allies, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Shia groups in Iraq, to attack Israel. On October the 14th at 2 o'clock in the morning, the rules changed. Allegedly in response to Israel's action, Iran attacked directly. Now, if we took two dates, April the 14th and April the 7th, I think in many ways we can contrast them and actually understand what's happened to Israel in the last 6 months. We've talked in other podcasts about October the 7th. We've talked in other podcasts about how Israel on that date, that fateful date, when Hamas fighters and Gazan civilians came over the border and butchered and raped. Yes, for those of you cynical, it did happen. We've talked in the past about how on October the 7th, the very idea of Israel and the Zionist entity was challenged. On October the 7th, the concept of a country which would defend the Jews, which would enable Jews not to have to hide from their neighbours, to be a country in which there was an army which could defend Jews, was challenged. On October the 7th, there was a pogrom. On October the 7th, Jews were left to defend for themselves without an army, which took over 24 hours to get its act together. If you contrast that to April the 14th, 2024, 6 months later, it couldn't be more different. Here, working together with an international alliance, Israel managed, with a 99% interception rate, to repel over 170 drones, 120 ballistic missiles, and 30 cruise missiles. Not only that, the beleaguered Israel, the Israel which had been isolated in public opinion because of its failed policy in Gaza, was relying actively on the support of America, the support of France, the support of Britain. But even more interesting, it also had the support of Arab countries, including Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Given the difficulties and the pressure that Biden had put on Benjamin Netanyahu, in his reluctance to support a campaign in Rafah, in his pressure to allow so-called humanitarian aid into Gaza, even though we know that the humanitarian aid was actually feeding Hamas, that by providing humanitarian aid, Israel would be strengthening Hamas because Hamas controlled where that aid went to. Despite all of that, despite the anti-Semitism, despite the demonstrations, Joe Biden came out and delivered. Quote, this is Biden, I'll try and do my best Biden impression. I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu to reaffirm America's ironclad commitment to the security of Israel. I told him that Israel demonstrated a remarkable capacity to defend against and defeat even unprecedented attacks, sending a clear message to its foes that they cannot effectively threaten the security of Israel. Bottom line, Joe Biden was behind Israel and supported it on his day of need. But what we will see is friends often also will require and dictate demands. And what we're seeing increasingly, as we are with Gaza, we are now with Iran, is the ultimate pressure on Israel not to react. And if you are to react, to do it cleverly. I can't overemphasize the importance of the international community or coalition that was created. And remember, it wasn't only Israel. If it was only Israel, many more of the missiles would have got through. We see the United States firing at over 70 drones and 3 ballistic rockets. Great Britain, not so great, let's call it Britain, had fighter planes active in Iraq and Syria. The Jordanians fired at drones and rockets as they came over their country. Even the French were active in the area. It's not just support, it's not just condemnation, it's actual physical use of force to protect the Jewish state. That will go down in the history books. What we saw emerge on April the 14th at 2 o'clock in the morning was actually a nightmare scenario which had been predicted and actually been practiced. The response to Hezbollah in the north firing, although, and we'll talk about this in a second, Hezbollah didn't really use much. It's continuing to fire. Even now as I speak, rockets are coming over the north. There's news of injuries in the north. But at the moment, it's still that war of attrition, that low-level fighting. The use of rockets directly from Iran, that's the game changer. In other words, because the rockets came from Iran, Israel cannot just aim at the proxies, can't just say, all right, we'll take out, we'll aim at Yemen, as America has done. We'll aim at the Houthis there. You know what, we'll aim at some small group of Shiites in Iraq, the Badr organization, the Kataib al-Hezbollah or the Yasaib al-Haraq, one of those groups. Because it came from Iran, Israel has to, if it wants to, respond back directly, and Iran itself. Now, that nightmare scenario had been practiced, and I think that that's why it was so effective. What we've seen emerge, though, is something which will also go down as a dilemma. And I'd be interested to hear what you think. Look, let's understand where we're at. Iran attacks. Israel, with an international coalition, defends itself. Many would argue that Israel should not respond back. Wait, hold on a second. Whoa. By the way, there's precedent for it. In other words, if you look at the attack by Saddam Hussein in the Gulf War, where Scuds were fired at Tel Aviv, I remember it, being a young student sitting in my gas mask. Yep, I'm that old. Waiting for the Scuds to arrive, thinking that we were going to be killed by chemical weapons of Saddam Hussein. Well, Yitzhak Shamir didn't respond. He didn't attack back. Why? Because of pressure from the United States. The international community is saying, look, the fact that you defeated or repelled with a success rate of 99% everything they threw at you, that in itself is a deterrent. It means that Iran should know, together with Hezbollah, they can't do anything. Don't respond. More than that, what you're now seeing is the real reality of an international community. What you're now seeing is an international community that's been created, which is Arab and Western, which, one, can defend Israel, and two, maybe, just maybe, come to the rescue in the war which has gone belly up in Gaza. There's a problem, though. This is the Middle East, and the Middle East perhaps works with different logic. You see, people here would say, you can't be attacked at that level and not respond. No other country would. If America had that happen to them, well, we know what happened when 3 aeroplanes attacked, or were used to attack in 9/11. The Brits, would they do the same? The French? Well, so why should Israel? Isn't that a double standard? 2 is you have to have deterrence. Just the fact that you can sit there and be hit and not bleed is not a deterrent. We're in the Middle East. This is a boxing ring, if you like. There's another issue. The issue is not just should you do nothing, but if you do something, which it looks like there will be a response. Now the question is when and how. It's nearly Passover. Do we want Passover to become a regional war on the Seder night? Or actually, do we want to do the Yom Kippur War in reverse? No one expected the Yom Kippur War because it was on Yom Kippur. Maybe the Iranians won't expect an attack on the Seder night because it's the Seder night. The Jews are... Oh, hold on, that could be interesting. Just speculating. On the other hand, maybe there's other alternatives than a full-out war. Look, how could, and this is what's raising the, people are asking the question, which is, could there be a limited attack on Iran? Could you attack army bases, attack its oil reserves, but not a full-out war? The question is, if you just did that, Iran has said quite clearly, any attack is an attack on our sovereignty, and we will respond much harder than we did before. Well, hold on, it was pretty rough last time. On the other hand, maybe Israel could attack on Iranian interests in Lebanon and the region, which we are doing. And yesterday we saw more targeted killing of those members of Hezbollah. But is that really enough? Is that just mowing the lawn, as they once say? What about cyber attacks? Well, yeah, that could do it. Then we've done that before. We've closed down their petrol gas stations. We've changed the wordings on their road signs. We've even attacked their computer systems, so we're told by foreign sources. But really, is that a response to a major aerial attack? Is that enough? And, whoa, surprise, surprise. We're now going to get more sanctions on Iran. Hold on, this is the same President Biden who lifted some of the sanctions only a few weeks back, offering the Iranians the possibility of trade. Out of all of the things I've said, a limited attack, an attack on Iranian interests in the region, a cyber attack, diplomatic attack, many of those have been tried before and haven't been successful. You see, the problem is the rules of the game have now changed. Because let's say, and I don't quite buy it, but let's say that this is a response to the attack on the consulate in Syria by Israel, so we're told. Well, next time Israel acts, we're going to have more rockets coming over directly from Iran at that level. The rules of the game have changed. Many in Israel would say we need a response which would deter a response from Iran. But hold on a second, then it gets a bit more dangerous because things can cycle out of control very quickly. What happens if they then respond back? Let's say they respond back and they hit Tel Aviv. And there's casualties. Israel would be forced to respond back again. And if we respond back again, they will respond back more, and then we would respond. And that doesn't include the promise by Iran that they would also attack those Arab countries who were treacherous, those Arab countries who supported Israel. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates. What happens if they close the Straits of Hormuz? What happens if they use the Houthis to cut off the Red Sea completely? What happens if they move warships near the Straits of Gibraltar and cut off the Mediterranean, or target the gas production centres of Israel in the Mediterranean? The problem is any response by Israel can quickly get out of control. The other problem is, if Israel doesn't respond, it opens the way to Iran striking more forcefully every time we try to, target missiles coming in from Iran to Lebanon for Hezbollah, for example. There's no answers. There's choices. And with everything in the Middle East, every choice, there's a price to pay. Let's remind ourselves also of the reality on the ground post-October the 7th. You have Hezbollah in the north, who hasn't been weakened. You've got something like 80,000, 90,000 Israelis in the north from the northern border who are displaced people in their own country. You have many in the south who've still not returned. Many have now returned. So all of that is still on the undecided back burner. More than that, what is happening is you're seeing refugees. Displaced people. But hold on, there's another issue. Have we forgotten something? Haven't we forgotten that there's still 132 hostages being held by Hamas? What about them? The negotiations with Hamas aren't going anywhere. They're falling the stalemate. There's nothing more that Israel can offer. You see, without attacking, Israel may be able to do something else, which is actually end the war in the Gaza Strip, and maybe, just maybe, be able to get some of the hostages back. An interesting report on Channel 12 News has suggested that there were talks going on between the Americans and many of the Arab countries and the United Nations. Hold on, here we're talking about NATO rather than the United Nations, actually, which would see the formation of a temporary government in Gaza, which was neither Hamas or Fatah, but an international force, which would be backed by NATO, which would last for 5 years. It would be neither Hamas nor Fatah. You would then have elections, and then it would move on from there. But the international community would take upon itself to stabilize Gaza. Yeah, I've heard that somewhere before, and it's called South Lebanon. Not quite the same, not NATO. That was United Nations peacekeeping forces. It's weird, isn't it? The Middle East, the allies of Israel are very good at dictating policy to Israel. They're less good at committing their own troops on the ground. What, America's going to have boots on the ground in Gaza? The Brits are, the French are? I don't see it somehow. There's a lot at stake. A lot is happening. But I think our duty is still to remember those hostages. For the families and the relatives, for many, it's a desperate situation where there seems to be no hope on the horizon. We throw out the word Hezbollah a lot. And I think it's important to remember that Hezbollah's capabilities are much, much stronger than Hamas. What we could see as a full-out war with Iran, we could see also Hezbollah being used on the northern front. Now, Hezbollah's got over 150,000 rockets. They too can aim. They've also got over 2,000 drones. That's Hezbollah. That's not Iran coming over from Iran. They have something like 100,000 potential fighters. So you could have a whole northern front together with an Iranian direct shooting front, plus the south, plus the war unfinished in Gaza. That's a nightmare scenario. Meanwhile, have a look at what is happening in the West Bank. We saw the kidnapping of and killing of an Israeli teenager, and we're seeing the increase of settler violence. The potential for violence in the West Bank is growing. More than that, Iran is feeding weapons into the West Bank. Jordan is in a delicate situation. Long-term goal, the Iranians would like to overthrow the kingdom there, the monarchy there. The Saudis, they've also, despite meant to have diplomatic relations now with Iran, also seem to have their back against the wall. So that's when people talk about a regional conflict. That's the problem. That's the reality that we're seeing on the ground until today. Obviously, this is a developing story, and I will keep you up to date both on the podcasts and on videos. On my Instagram, Awesome Seminars, I have put up a couple of videos, a few videos of me commenting. I'm also going to be traveling and already starting to book speaking events in the fall or the autumn. So we'll see there. Or if you want, we can also set up with your organisation some form of Zoom course or discussion with your organisation as well. If you are coming to Israel, and please do come. One of the most amazing things I'm doing at the moment is speaking to volunteers who come to Israel, spend some time and say, hey, I want to make a difference. Make sure you look me up, make sure that you touch base, and it'll be a pleasure to meet you also in Israel itself. Let's hope for a peaceful week. And for those of you of the Jewish faith, may you have a peaceful Passover.